Dennis, I'll start with you. At a time when everyone's talking about a housing shortage, why do you think we could end up with a glut?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I think it's a great question. It's one that we tackled in this thematic report you mentioned, Cradle to Grave, which we published about 6 weeks ago. I think what you noted at the beginning is that the number of homes for sale is at historic lows. And I think we've always struggled with that being the litmus test of whether we have enough inventory or not. You go back to 2005 as an example. Month supply in January of 2005 was 3.8 months. It was the lowest ever at that point. But that clearly misread what was actually happening from a supply-demand standpoint. And so what we did in this report is really take a step back and say, we know there's a cyclical benefit right now from interest rates falling from the pandemic. But once you sort through that, you're going to be left with core demand. And core demand really ties back to demographics. And the demographic piece is really what's going to dictate how much supply we need over the next couple of years. And while we believe that right now demand is very strong, as you get past those factors, there's a downward trajectory of population growth, household formation as well. That's really going to undermine the need for what's being built. And on the other side of that, you have the development community that's actually very optimistic about there being a housing shortage and actually very optimistic about how much needs to be built. And they're actually pressing the accelerator harder than we think they probably should be.
You know, Diana, I'd like to have you react here. We've just been running the names of some of the companies in the home building area, and they're all up pretty strongly today. My experience by observation is that builders build. They love to build, and sometimes they overbuild, which really dovetails, I suppose, with what Dennis is saying here. What are your thoughts here? And then let's not forget that there are different segments within that building community. Some are more focused on the lower end, entry-level houses. Some are, like Toll, focused on the higher end.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, Tyler, is some will benefit, some will not. If you look at where the demand is, it's on the low end of the market, and that's where the market is really tightest. I mean, the Realtor.com put out a report saying we're actually short 5.24 million homes because of high demand and low supply, and so much of that is on the low end. So I think those who benefit are your D.R. Hortons and your KB Homes, who through the long term are going to be building that entry-level product that is so much demand now and so much more in the formation. Those in the middle, your Lennars, your Pulte's, maybe your Taylor Morrisons, who are building that step-up home, they, you know, if Dennis is right, they may be the ones who are stuck in that oversupply situation. Toll Brothers, the luxury, they're in a very small niche. They're an $800,000 house, and that's going to be based on farther up, move up buyers and more based on the economy for people who want that luxury home. So I wouldn't put it in that. But again, the shortage that we're seeing now, you talk to any real estate agent, anyone out there trying to flip a house, it's rough out there. And when you look forward, the builders are not building as much as we would expect to them, even given this shortage.
So, Dennis, what's happening here is you basically think that the builders are not taking into account slowing population growth and that we're already surpassing demand by 20 to 25% for single-family homes, in which case, when is that going to catch up with the builders, and is it going to flip prices and supply for the whole industry?
Yeah, and I'd be careful just to isolate this down to home builders, because you have home builders who bring supply. You now have single-family rental companies who are bringing a lot of supply to build for rent, and you have multifamily developers bringing supply. So all three of those pieces have seen a very big step up in optimism on the development side, and it is going to take some time for that to come to market, whether it's developing the community, building out the infrastructure, developing the multifamily building, which might take 12 or 18 months. So you're going to have a period of time where the supply is unaffected by the demand, but it's going to be coming pretty aggressively. And what we point to on the demographic side is all these analyses that are talking about how short the housing market is for number of units. It's all based from a supply standpoint. It's all based on looking at history and saying this is how many housing starts we've had historically. That means we should be building something similar today. What they're not taking into account is that demand demographically is on a downward trajectory. If you look at household formation this past decade, which is data just came out recently with the decennial census, it's about 24% below where household formation was in the prior 4 decades. So why are we using history to gauge how much we need going forward from a demand standpoint when we have an entirely different demographic circumstances behind that?
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.